Our best friends are always there to listen to us. They're always there to comfort us and to never criticize our artwork. And these are the pets that we keep. In this week's portrait painting video, we're going to be painting this guy right here. And I'm going to keep an image of Mr. Taco on the top left corner of your screen as I develop the painting. Getting started here, I'm just going to apply a little wash of mineral spirits. I'm going to start off by listing all the colors that I have. So I have Zinc White, Raw Umber, Alizarin Crimson, Cadmium Red, Cadmium Orange, Yellow Ochre, Cadmium Yellow, Sap Green, Cobalt Teal, Ultramarine Blue, and Ivory Black. And if you would like to know exactly which materials I'll be using, I will have all of that information typed up in the description box below. So if you want to know exactly which paint tubes that I'm using or which brushes that I'm using or any of that, just look in the description box below and I will have that all typed up. So I'm going to start off with a size 2 filbert bristle brush, and this bristle brush is going to act as my drawing brush. Now remember the mineral spirits that we applied earlier? That is to facilitate the movement of the paint like this. Otherwise it would be sticking even more on the surface. So in any case, let's get started with the block-in of Mr. Taco. So first thing I want to do is get an idea of the placement of the head on the panel. So just any kind of rough shape like this to indicate where I want to place the head. Now I'm going to have the top of the head somewhat around here, the bottom of the head somewhat around here, and a little angle for his neck here. Now with pet portraits, since this is my first video on a pet portrait, I like to give our furry friends as much respect as I do when I paint human beings. So I'm going to pretty much treat this exactly like I do when I do portrait paintings of humans. That is, I'm starting off with just the most simplistic shapes that I can come up with. Very much just straight lines and angles to indicate where I want the features to fit. And thinking about the composition of the picture, I don't want to center his head, so that's why I labeled the top and the bottom as quickly as I could, so that this distance here isn't equal to this distance here, even though it might look like that on the screen. Alright, so with that simple shape of the head, I'm going to go and give a little center line that'll give me the orientation of the Chihuahua in space. So he is approximately at some kind of a 3/4 turn relative to me. 3/4 meaning this is split, so he's not looking straight at me, but he's turned just a little bit this way, so I want to make a little indication of what turn he's making relative to me. And then now we're going to have a little axis for his eyes here. Just a little rectangle for both of those axes, for both of those shapes. And then a little smudge here for his nose. And again, I'm trying to give the Chihuahua the same amount of respect that I do with human beings. So I'm trying to keep my shapes as simplistic as possible. Here we have a little shape for one eye socket. Here we have another shape for another eye socket. Just keeping this as simply as possible. Each feature is going to be pretty much a minimalistic brush stroke, or even a blob if you want to think about it like that. Just keeping it as simple as possible. So the nose is a little bit closer on a vertical to this eye than it is to this eye. So I'm going to move this little blob a little more to the right. And then of course we have the bottom of his mouth. So a little shape for that right there. Nothing's really set in stone. We're just trying to get an idea of where things are going to fit. Here's a little shape for the bottom of his eye. Everything is malleable. Everything is in flux. I can adjust any shape that I want to at this stage. And I want to keep it as simplistic as possible, especially with a portrait painting. You want to keep things as simple and easy for you to understand. So when time comes for any kind of adjustments, those adjustments will be simple and easy for you to understand. So I did get a little bit of the alizarin crimson into my mixture, but that's alright. I'm just trying to get an idea of the shapes. So now I'm going to look at the space from this eye to the edge of the face. So the space from this eye to the edge of the face here is pretty small, but the space from this edge to this eye is a little bit larger. So I'm going to employ that kind of thinking. So now with a piece of paper towel, I'm going to further solidify where I want the eyes to be placed. So there's quite a gap between both of his eyes. So I want to get that gap as accurately as possible, this little distance here. And here we have the nose. Trying to keep it as simplistic as I possibly can. So now let's look at the angle between the two eyes. The angle seems to be a slight bit this way. Now this might be a little bit too much, but it's somewhat in that type of direction. Let's hold off on the details for as long as possible. So I'm not really trying to focus too much on the eyelashes or any kind of the fur or any of the patterns of the fur. Trust me, we'll get into that. But if you're new to painting, and if you're new to portraiture or anything related to portrait painting, that's alright. It's just a series of shapes. All we're doing is just relating a series of shapes. You can do this. The top of the head is about here. So again, it's a very simple shape. There's a little bit more distance from this eye to the top of the head than this eye to the bottom of the mouth here. Just a little more distance, and his head is kind of boxy like. Let's put a little bit of the edge of his muzzle now. Again, very minimalistic. That is like 3 lines. Then we have the little top crest of his head, and that's actually going to be kind of useful for establishing the center line of his head. So I'm just going to put a little mark for that there. So a little angle here. Again, nothing is really set in stone. I'm just trying to use simple shapes to figure out where everything is going to fit. So I'm going to see the entire head as one structure, just one unit. And then I'm going to attach the ears onto that unit. Little curve there for the snout. I think that this has to get closer to this shape, just optically. So I'm going to push it up a little bit. And trying to capture the character that someone has, whether it's a pet portrait or a human portrait, it's all about just relating these simple shapes to one another. Little turn there for his mouth. Bottom of his mouth is somewhat there. There's a little shape over here. Corner's right there. Now the corner of this little shape here, I'm going to follow through on the other side. So here's the little indent for his eye. Bottom of the ear goes about there. There's a line here. Now we'll attach this ear onto this structure that we're creating. Just using straight lines and angles to construct this. There's a little bit of a roll here. A little bit of a turn there. Let's give Mr. Taco a little bit of a smile. A little bit of a smile. Now I'm going to start to look at the patterns of the fur. Normally in a portrait at this stage I'd be looking for the light and shadow, but I think I'm going to try to get the designs of his fur a little bit first. So here's Mr. Taco's little mohawk. Goes down here. Then we have a dark patch over here. Tiny little distances here. Corner of his eye. Now this shape wraps around like something like this. Goes down here. There's another angle for his eye. Angles up, down this way. Now the continuation of the pattern on this side. Let's look at this. It's a little more flat as it turns up. Really trying to get the character of Mr. Taco. Angles like this. I'm looking at the negative shapes as well. That is this large shape here. I'm going to use my paper towel to kind of fill in some of this dark. Not really trying to render anything right now. I'm just trying to figure out where everything is placed. So here's the corner of the bottom of his mouth. And at this stage, I would really be standing back a lot to see if I'm getting the characteristics of Mr. Taco. Alright, so the side of the head angles like this, kind of mimicking this side. Now this may be a little far down, so I'm going to push that up a little bit. Simple and easy. Now this angle right here is too sharp, so I can start to create that curve using straight lines and angles. And now this goes down, turns in like this, then goes out. Now his eyes have little, I don't know if dogs have tear ducts, but a little mark here. Don't quote me on my knowledge of dog anatomy, because I don't know a lot about dog anatomy. Believe it or not, I'm just looking at simple shapes. A little bit of dark there, kind of illustrating his eyes. And now here's one corner of the ear, and I'm going to relate it to this corner of this ear. Let's look at the outline of the outside shape here a little bit. Here goes up like that, turns around like something like this. Simple and easy. This turns around to a shape like this, kind of almost giving him devilish horns. Gonna erase a little bit here. Again, this is really analogous to using vine charcoal. The handling of this drawing brush. Remember, I'm using raw umber. So the other ear starts somewhere over here. You can think of this as a vine charcoal and the paper towel as a kneaded eraser. This might actually go a little higher up. Makes an angle over the top of the ear. Pretty much goes out to there. Just eyeballing it at the moment. Makes a little sway like this. Curves in here. Goes in like that. Might have his ear too wide, so I'm going to cut a little bit in there. So now the bottom of his collar goes down to here. Here's the little lock for his collar. Just rough that in there. So I'm going to crop the Chihuahua a little bit like this. And then we'll fill in the background color and stuff. So that's going to be the overall design of where I want the Chihuahua to fit. Alright, now that we have the relative placements of the eyes, the nose, the snout, the mouth, the devilish ears, and a little bit of a crest, let's not forget about simple light and shadow. So there is a little bit of shadow, and I'm going to use the same drawing color to make a mark for where it's going to go. There is a shadow here, so before you put in a lot of details or information in the fur and all that stuff, try to locate where your shapes of light and shadow are going to fit. Even though it's very hard to see in this image, there will be a shadow here, here, and then correspondingly a little bit here. Now this is also from my knowledge of when I took the photo reference, there was a window and the light was coming at about this angle. So this part of the face is being hit with light, and then this part of the face is going to be in shadow. Alright, I'm sure Mr. Taco would want us to have fun with this. So let's break some rules a little bit. So I'm just gonna go in and start to render things, which is something I'd never do with a human portrait, but let's have some fun with this. So with a combination of the zinc white, a little bit of the sap green, and a tad bit of alizarin, I'm going to go in with the lightest light right over here. And by breaking rules, I mean I'm just going to start to go in and add lots of little tiny bits of information, and that's not something I would usually do. But in any case, I do kind of break these rules with portraits of human beings. I think it's important to explore. So here we have a lot of white up here, and maybe a tad bit of cobalt teal. Let's add some more cobalt teal there. Alright, so I have 3 brushes in my hand right now. So I'm going to focus on 3 values. And not even that, I'm just going to use this brush perhaps for maybe a bunch of tiny little values. So I used a little bit of the green there. Let's use more of the alizarin crimson, maybe the cobalt teal, to try and get the gray. Let's just get ivory black. Try to get the gray for his forehead. Just a nice little gray there. Nice and easy. Little bits of gray. Now this guy here is my fan brush, and this fan brush is going to help me to eliminate glare. So I'm going to keep that on hand. So now I'm going to add a little bit of the zinc white to that mixture of the gray. and try to lighten up this little shape here. Just lighten it up a little bit, not too much. Now this corner is going to be darker, so I'm actually just going to use this brush now to push some more of the gray out. Maybe it's a little warmer. Let's use some of the cadmium red, just a little bit. Experimenting with color. Standing back, that is still too blue. So let's just get some of the raw umber and the zinc white. And let's just cover a little more there. Maybe some orange will help. Let's try some cadmium orange. Let's see how this works. Using lots of paint now. Just filling in the shape here. Now I'm going to go back to the light. I'm going to use some more cobalt teal for the top. Why not? Just a little bit of cobalt teal there. Now switching to my dark brush, I'm going to use a little bit of raw umber, alizarin crimson, cobalt teal, a little more cobalt teal, a little yellow ochre to lighten the value a bit. Now we're going to place some of these darks. Some of these darks here. Switching to the halftone brush. I'm going to go back here. Notice how quickly we're going to be able to develop form by making some values lighter, like this one, because it's facing the light a little bit more, and some values darker, like these, because they're facing the light less. And let's just go into this dark that we mixed up here. Paint some of the dark there. Give Mr. Taco this nice rich dark that he has under here. Very quickly with these colors and these planes, we're going to be able to get the effect of Chihuahua on the surface. So a little bit more dark here. Kind of comparing that dark to this dark. Pretty similar. Fan brush there. Switching to my halftone. It's a little bit of a halftone here. Let's just spread it around the whole thing. Just spread it on the whole thing here. Taco would not want you to stress out over his portrait. Telling you this is a wonderful Chihuahua. Except when he wants to bark during my filming. So a little bit more of the blue there, why not? It's a little bit darker there because it's receiving less light. And let's just carry that through over here. He has a little patch of light there. Let's paint that little patch in with this. Let some of the colors that are already on there mix with this. Do the same thing up here. Now let's look at the areas over here. So we're going to get a little bit lighter as we approach this little plane that I made a mark for here. And if you don't know what a plane is just a concept of a flat space, a flat object in three-dimensional space. So this panel you can think of as a plane resting in this entire space. Going back to my darker colors, it's a little darker over here, a little darker over there, and it's getting lighter as it approaches here. A little bit more light right here. And we have a little light patch of fur right there. Very simple. And we have some more little grays over here. Mr. Taco is getting some gray hairs. Poor guy. He's only about 6 years old. Some more hairs over here. And then let's put some of the lights for this. Let's move quickly. Mr. Taco does not have that much patience. So we have the zinc white, cobalt teal, and whatever colors were already on this brush. There we go. Maybe 2 blue. A little bit of, let's use some cadmium red, just a touch. Back to the zinc white. Let's see what happens. Still 2 blue. Alright, the raw umber. A little bit more raw umber. Maybe that was too much. Take some off. Back to the zinc white. And that's a little better. So the light goes over here. This light goes all the way around here. And I'm using the color to also further develop the drawing as well. A little bit more light there. Now this is the lightest plane, and I don't want to use straight white. So I'm going to use something close to that, but still knowing that it's tinted with the colors that I already had. Very simple. Let's turn the brush a little bit just to apply more paint on the surface. There we go. Now we're talking fur. Now it's starting to look like fur. Very simply just push it around. That's what Mr. Taco wants. He wants you to give him his fur. Now we're getting closer to halftones, but these are kind of more on the pinkish. So let's use this with a tad bit of cadmium red. Lighten up the value a tad bit. There we go. Something like that. And of course, this is going to gradate to the light there. So let's just mix them on the palette. Very simple. And of course, he has some light values over here. Let's paint that in there. Maybe use a little more of this. Why not even throw some yellow ochre into the mix? Why not? Right here. Alright, so the dark of the nose is really dark on the photo reference, but it's not straight black. So let's use some raw umber, a little bit of ultramarine blue. Let's see what happens. It's pretty good. So let's look at the shape of this nose first. Let's compare the shape to the eyes. So standing back, this shape is a little bit bigger than that of the eyes. So let's work this dark shape and the dark of the eyes. So using that same mixture, we have this dark shape here. This dark shape over here. Angles up, goes down. Bottom of the eye there. Corner of the eye here. Now this shape is bigger, so now that I kind of have more of an idea of the shape of these two eyes, maybe I forgot some dark here. So now that I have an idea of the shape of these eyes, I'm going to try to put my foot down on what this shape looks like for the nose. And it's something like this. It is a little bit bigger than these shapes, but not that much. It's a little heart-looking shape here. Let's try to get it just right. Then it peeks over this way, something like that. And it's okay if some of the colors mix into that. Not a perfectionist. Now doing that, I have to correspondingly move the mouth up. So let's just use what's on the brush for now. Put a little mark here. And there goes the mouth. Simple and easy to move up. Alright, so there's some red or some pink going on in there. Still kind of dark, so let's use these mixtures. A little bit of cadmium red into it. Spin the brush around. Let's put some cadmium red in there. There we go. Now let's not forget the ears. So I'm going to thin out the paint just a little bit with this dark brush using some of my walnut oil, but very little, trace amounts of walnut oil. So use just, take something off the palette, just fill it in. Dark value, just fill it in. Just think of it as a simple shape. That's all it is, just a simple shape. Easy to understand. Thin it out a little bit more, use some more of this. Just throw in some cobalt teal, why not? Let's fill in that shape, very easy. And the nice thing about having a smaller brush right now is that I can have more control over what the outside shape will look like. Let's turn the ear like that, just a little bit, just a little bit. Scrub that on there, very simple. Giving him his devilish ears, the look of a Chihuahua. Very simple. Now the ears have a little bit of light on the corners here, so let's just get some of this. Maybe some sap green, why not? Just a little bit lighter, and a little bit cooler. Just a few little touches here and there. Let's get some of this white. Turn it around, spin the brush, there you go. Alright, some more light over here. And this is facing the light more, but this is facing the light less, so less pressure, more pressure here. A little more pressure there. It's facing the light a little bit more. Now there's some light in between the ears here, so let's just use what's on the brush. It's already light. Scrub it in there. Simple. Same thing on this side. Scrub it in there. It's all about the shapes. Just looking at the shapes. Speaking of the shapes, there's a darker accent here that I should put in there. So raw umber, ultramarine blue, and a little alizarin crimson. A little more alizarin crimson. Dark shape right in there. And over here. Very simple. Let's use the fan brush. And I'm using this fan brush to eliminate as much glare as I possibly can. Alright, let's get into some of the smaller shapes now. So I'm going to use a little bit of cadmium orange, alizarin crimson, some of the raw umber, zinc white, more zinc white. And we're going to paint the light around here. He's got some lights around his eyes. Something like that. Very simple. And he has another over here, but it's a little lighter. So let's use some cadmium yellow. Why not? Right here. It's a little bit more light right there. And a little more light there, but I think it's a little more greenish. Sap green. Let's get some more light there. Try to get the effect of Chihuahua. Let's just follow it through all the way around here. And some more on the corner here. Now back to the dark brush. I'm going to just go into this puddle. I'm going to put, lighten it with a little bit of cobalt teal And make it a little cooler. Let's throw in some of these colors. Want it to be dark, but not so dark. Let's paint that in there. It's almost like a circle. Very simply, just patting it on there. Let's follow through on the other side. Very simple, just patting it on there. Very easy. See, when you keep your shapes simple and easy to understand, then when it comes time to make more additions like that, they will be simple and easy to understand. And let's get into some of these lights. It's a little touch of light right here. And I don't see any light there. Now in here, there's going to be a much darker value. So Ivory Black, Alizarin Crimson, and some raw Umber, just so we don't have straight black. Don't want to use straight black. Now the dark fits right here. Hopefully that reads on the camera. This is a darker shape that I added onto that other dark shape. Remember, I didn't want this shape to get that dark, and that was so that I could add this shape to it. Here we go, follows through over here. And now we can add the little highlights. So let's get into the Cobalt Teal, the Zinc White. So we have Cobalt Teal, some Zinc White. Now let's spin the brush a little bit so we can get all the paint. There we go, something like this. And there's the light right here. Just like that. Now on the other side, the light somewhat over here. Very simple. And of course there's a double highlight here, but I'm gonna make the highlight here on the other side a little bit more blue, more cobalt teal. Just very lightly. The painting will not explode if the highlight is in the wrong spot. All we have to do is just come back and then adjust it. That's all. Now there's a little bit more of a reflected light here. Let's just get into these mixtures. Almost looks like a nice purple. A little bit of reflected light here. Simple and easy. And then over here, it might be a little lighter. Lighten it up with colors already on the palette. Just a little lighter there. Simple and easy. Now I may be missing some of the corner of his eye here. Let's get into this dark puddle that's already on the palette. And let's try to paint that in there. Little tip for you. If you're painting eyes on a human being or on any kind of pet, try to use a mirror. Look at the eyes that you're painting in the mirror, then you may be able to see things that you're missing. Still, I'm missing something here, so I'm going to go in and put some more of the colors that I already had here, and a little bit of cadmium red. A little touch there. And it could be that I just have too much dark here. Let's take some of that dark out. Then on this puddle that we mixed before for this larger dark, I'm going to use that to pull over here. Simple and easy. See, if you keep your painting simple and easy, then the corrections will be simple and easy for you to understand. So now using this same mixture, it's a little bit darker beneath the eye here. It's all about the shapes. So this shape is a little bit darker, but not that dark. So it's going with these half tones, or maybe a little more cobalt teal. Let's switch to our halftone brush for that. Cobalt teal, zinc white. It's a little bit lighter over here. Then back to the dark brush. I'm going to let these values gradate over here. And it's a little bit darker over here too. Now with the halftone brush, I'm going to cut in this angle a little bit more. Something like that. Not cut in too much. That's okay. Switch to the dark brush. Alizarin crimson, ivory black. Onto the colors that were already on there. Very simply paint that on there. Now I'm going to pull this shape down a little bit. The halftone brush. Just a middle gray for that. Add a little more light here. Just follow through. Let's try to get the character of this Chihuahua. His eyes are very far apart. Use the fan brush. Now it does get a little darker down here. So I'm pretty much using the mixture that I had for the dark part of his eye there. His little iris. So if you really want to make something look realistic, it's pretty much all about describing the simple light and dark patterns and the simple shapes. Going back to my halftone brush, it's almost like magic what happens when you start to apply the values onto the simple shape. Now look how it's going to start to take form. Very easy, just pushing it into the dark shape that I painted. Very simple. It's almost going to start to look like fur. The actual fur that he has. Let's move the brush strokes in this direction. Try to get some more effect of the fur. It's almost like magic, isn't it? It's a little bit more light here, but not as bright as the highlight. So if you really want to make something look realistic, think about the areas like this little area here. Think about them as planes, like just planes that are existing in space relative to a light source. This plane is getting lighter than the surrounding planes because it's facing the light more. Simple and easy. And it's going to be a little bit darker over here. Let's throw in some cobalt teal into some of the grays we already had. See what happens. Nice and easy. Just comparing each shape of value in relation to the surrounding ones. Doesn't get any simpler. And eliminate the glare there so you can see more clearly. Now that I placed this shape and I notice there's still some more dark over here I haven't quite described. So again, just a little bit of the dark that I already had for the eye, just taking things that are already on my palette. Just trying to describe the dark. This little dark shape here. Simple and easy. Just painting in this little shape. Don't need to know what the shape is. You just need to know how it relates to the surrounding shapes. And there's a little gray patch over here that I didn't quite describe yet. So let's get into the middle grays. Get some more of the grays here. A little more of the grays here. The halftone brush. And then let's work on this top plane here and follow through to the other side. Simple and easy. Now the patches of fur, these light patches of fur, I'm actually going to soften them out like this with the halftone brush, and then I'm going to come back with my light brush. A little bit of the zinc white and the ivory black and a tad bit of cadmium yellow. Just to add a little more flavor. Let's paint in this little patch of fur. Very softly painting it. And again, if you want to know exactly which materials I'm using, I will put the information in the description box below. And now let's just add zinc white to that mixture, just some more white. Let's try to get the effect of the fur. Very simple and easy. Let's get into some of the fur on his head. So with just a combination of raw umber, ultramarine blue, and a tad bit of zinc white, I have a nice middle gray that's still fairly dark. So I'm going to go ahead and apply the brush strokes to give the effect of the fur. Very softly going to let some patches be darker, such as this one here, and then with less pressure I'm going to let other patches be a little bit lighter. Then I'm going to fill the brush again with paint and do the same thing on the other side. This little patch here is going to be darker, so I'm applying more pressure. And then as we gradate away from it, I'm applying less pressure. Very simply. More pressure here, more paint, and then less pressure as we go away from it to give the effect of the fur. Now I'm going to use the brush strokes themselves to hint at the existence of fur on his head. I'm going to use the fan brush to get rid of the glare, but it also softens it a little bit. And now some of the lighter planes on the top of his head, I'm pretty much going to use the same mixtures that I had for these areas, the lighter areas. Pretty much just took the same color off my palette. And we have a little more light over here. And correspondingly, a little more light over here. Just a brush stroke. And then of course, the mohawk that he has, pretty much just zinc white and a little bit of cobalt teal. Now I'm going to do the same thing I did down here, and I'm going to flatten it out. A darker value than need be, but depending on the way that I'm applying these brush strokes, it's going to give me the effect of the fur. And I'll show you why I want this to be a little bit darker in a minute. I'm going to use the fan brush again. So with just a little more of the zinc white and cobalt teal mixture, I'm going to add the light. So this is why I wanted the darker, more mid-tone layer right here, so that I can add the lighter color here, and depending on the brush strokes that I place, with more pressure in an area like this, I get an area that is receiving more light in comparison to another area like over here that's receiving less light. So I get more of a volume to the fur. So just a little lighter right there. Now we're going to very quickly just add a few more bits of information to this area of the painting. So using just raw umber and a little bit of alizarin crimson and a tad bit of ultramarine blue, I'm going to put the darker values, that's too much paint there, the darker values for the bottom of the mouth. And the trick here is to make a brush stroke and then stand very far back and see if it reads. And that's a very useful way to simplify, by just making a brush stroke and then standing back as much as you can. And now with the pretty much just the zinc white, ivory black, and a little bit of cobalt teal, I'm going to go back to these middle tones. Paint in this little divot here. Very simply. And it's a little bit lighter here, so a little bit more of the zinc white. Very simply. And now this little area over here, I'm just going to scumble what's on my brush for now. Just scumble that on there. Very simply. And this scumbling will actually help me with the effect of fur. So I'm going to add more values onto this scumble. And I'm not going to put too much down here. I want to leave kind of a vignette. A vignette is an area of the painting that's unfinished, that complements the areas that are more finished. So just a little more dark here, and a very, very scumble-like movement, just lightly feathering it on there. I'm letting some of the tone of the panel show through to help me out with some of the middle values as well. So it's a little bit darker here. Now this shape goes in like this, painting that in there. And then we have these lighter values here. So pretty much just using the mixtures that I had for an area like this, the same fashion, just scumbling it on there. Just trying to get an effect of the fur. Then I'm going to add more zinc white. And I'm going to add even more light here. And if you're wondering why I'm using zinc white is a transparent white, which allows me to use more of it without losing the integrity of the colors that I'm using. But it's alright to use something like titanium white if you want to, but with zinc white I'm able to use more of it and still maintain the integrity of the color that I'm using. Just a little more fur over here. Let's add some more light, just a little more zinc white and a tad bit of cobalt teal for some lighter patches here. Very simply just pushing the brush out like that to get the effect of the fur. Super simple. More pressure, more paint. Pushing it in that direction to get some fur, letting the brush strokes show. Now I'm going to paint the background color in. I have a different brush now, and I'm going to designate this. I'm going to label this my designated background brush. And if I reiterate, if you'd like to know exactly which materials I'm using, that is going to be typed up in the description box below. So with a combination of alizarin crimson, a little bit of raw umber, and some cadmium red, I have now the color that I want for the background. And I'm using a little bit of my mineral spirits and a little bit of my walnut oil. The walnut oil is a nice medium to thin out the paint, but I don't want to use straight walnut oil, so that's why I use a little bit of my mineral spirits. A little bit of raw umber to get rid of the saturation of the reds. It's alright if it touches some of those puddles. So I'm going to use this to further draw out the outside shape. This corner actually cuts in a little more over here and goes out like this. So depending on how much pressure I apply, if I do something like this, I can get a softer edge. Whereas if I press down harder like that, I can get a harder edge. So I want my harder edges to be around here. Very simply just push that out. Easy. Then a little bit of a softer edge over here. So just a little lighter touch right there to give me a softer edge. And this part of his head I'm going to actually make much sharper too. I'm going to turn the brush a little bit so that I can get more of a point there. And then that's it. A little bit of sharper edge here too. I'm actually going to soften it a little by the top of his mohawk. And I'm going to have the edge a little bit softer here too. Then I'm going to sharpen it right there. Then it gets softer over here. Again, a sharp edge here. And the softer edge here. Let's make this edge really soft. It's nice to have a variety of edges in your painting. Whether it's a painting of a pet, another type of animal, still life, whatever it is. It's nice to have a variety of edge. Now, I have to stand back to see if this distance is too wide, and I think it's a little too wide. But again, I'm not trying to make a perfect photographic image of my Chihuahua. I never really try to do that, even with my portrait paintings. Just try to relate things to one another and paint what I see, as opposed to just trying to copy it. Alright, so I'm just going to scrub a little bit more of the background now that I have the outline somewhat figured out, so I'm just going to fill in the rest of this. Now with some of the mixtures that I used for this area above his eye, I'm going to put a little bit of a top plane here. Now the value is kind of deceptive because it's lighter. Certainly this plane here is lighter, but it's not that much lighter, so it's maybe even darker than that. So I let some of the paint that's already on here, this dark paint, kind of mix with the paint that's on the brush. And then I'm going to put a little bit of alizarin into this mixture, just a very tiny amount. I'm going to use it to go a little bit further down here to illustrate some of the light in the middle of his nose. Then I'm going to go in with my combination of raw umber and ultramarine blue and a tad bit of alizarin to get the dark of his nostrils here. So here's one corner of the nostril, and here's another corner of the nostril. And so it makes a shape kind of like kind of like a Hershey's kiss over here, just like that, like a little Hershey's kiss. And the same goes with the other side, except you don't see as much of the little curve here. Now there's going to be a little bit more light up here. So it's not entirely down here, so there's some traces of light right here. And then correspondingly, a little bit of a highlight right here. And then there's a tad bit of blue in it, I perceive. So zinc white with cobalt teal and a tad bit of raw umber should do. Just a little touch right there. And then there's another light over here, but I perceive it to be a little bit warmer, more on the purple side. I know purple is kind of pushing it, so just a little bit of alizarin into that mixture that I already described to you. Just a little touch here. And that's all I need for that. And there's going to be a little more light on this corner as well, but I'm getting some glare, so I'm going to use my fan brush very carefully. I don't want to lose all the information I just put in there. Very lightly. So there's a little more light over here. Pretty much just the mixtures that I had over here I'm going to apply right there. Very lightly. And there's even a little bit of the fur coming up here to the corner. So let's go ahead and paint this little pathway here. Little pathway as we move up to the nostril. Now with the same value that I had for these darks, I'm going to go and make this angle a little bit. So this angle is a little bit higher up than I had, and then this is starting to droop, so he's looking kind of sad. And we all know Mr. Taco is not sad. So I'm going to go ahead and use some raw umber and a little bit of alizarin crimson, a tad bit of cadmium orange to get rid of this little frown looking thing. And then I'm going to go into some of the gray mixtures that I had over there, maybe a touch more cobalt teal, and then paint this little passage of light that I see here. And it's a little bit darker here, and a little bit lighter as we get away from that. Just a little bit. And there's a little bit more of a darker edge here. Let's paint that in there with the raw umber and a little ivory black. Now it's not a sharp edge, but there is pretty deep dark value over here. So I'm going to use a watercolor brush. It's kind of like a cheap sable or some kind of thin watercolor brush to feather out this edge. Not a very sharp edge. Just little touches like that will soften that edge. So thinning out the paint with a little bit of mineral spirits and a tad bit of walnut oil. I have now a different brush, and with the combination of raw umber and what was already on there, I'm going to very lightly sketch in a little more information on the bottom here, just to have more of a vignette. And again, a vignette is it's areas of the painting that you leave unfinished that complement the more finished areas. So in this case, this vignette is going to complement this area. I'm going to make it a little darker. Let's just reach into what's already on the palette. It's going to be a little bit darker there. Maybe a little cooler. Let's throw in some ultramarine blue. And then some raw umber. Tad bit of cobalt teal. Maybe a little ivory black. So this is going to be a little bit darker over here. And there's a little shape here. A little shape there. Very simply. Now I'm kind of scumbling the paint a little bit here, like I did on this area, just to get kind of the effect of fur with the application of the brush strokes. So very simply applying that there. Can't forget his collar now, so a little bit of raw umber and some ultramarine blue. I'm not going to paint everything that's on that collar, so I'm just going to put some little dark shapes for where the collar is going to fit. Something like that. And then down here, something like this. Just simple brush strokes for that collar. I'm going to let some of the paint that's on the brush mix with some of the paint that's already on the surface to give me a lighter value, just like that. Then I'm going to go back in with my ivory black, a little bit of my raw umber. Then I'm going to paint this little dark for the latch. One mark there, one mark there, and then I'm going to fill this in here. Now with a smaller brush, I'm going to get a little bit of the ivory black, some of the raw umber, just so that it's not straight black. I'm going to make a mark right here. I'm going to make another mark right here. And with the fan brush, I'm going to try to get rid of some of the glare there. And with another brush, let's pick up some of this light color. Now we have the highlight of that little hook. And then some of the halftones of the hook, we'll just use the paint that's already on it. Already on the brush. And we'll go back in with the dark. Fill in some of the dark here so we can get that hook. Then of course there's a dark under here. And the light of the hook, let's just use what's already on here. A little bit of a highlight there, very simply. Switching to the dark brush, some of the dark values here. And that's all we need. And I'm going to use some of the puddles that are already on here to get some of these darker values that are on the side here. And then make it look like the collar is actually going into the fur. Or it's wrapping around the fur there. And now this little latch here is going to be tricky, so I'll come to that later. So let's get some of the grays here for this little gray spot that's here. Another gray spot here. Another little gray spot there. I'm going to use the fan brush. And I'm kind of painting from the inside out. I'm working these shapes in the middle of the collar. And then I'm going to adjust the outline of the collar with the paint. Just like this. So the way I think I'm going to handle this collar is by painting in the light around it. So switching to a different brush now, I'm going to add a little bit of the walnut oil to it. to thin out the paint. Let's take what's already on here, maybe with a little bit of the cobalt teal. Now, using a vertical line from the corner of the nose here, I see that the curve of that little latch is a little bit to the right on a vertical. So there it is, a little corner for the latch. Very simply. So now we're going to let the vignette continue all the way down here. Let some of the brush strokes for the light just swoop around like that. Very simply. Now for the top of that little hook, it's a little bit up here, down, then over, down, over again. Single brush stroke. Switching to my smaller brush here, let's get some of the dark that's on the palette. Put some cobalt teal into it. Then get some of these little patches of fur back. Very simply pushing that over. And then switching back to that brush with the light, I'm going to then soften the edges here. And now for the latch, I'm going to look at the little bits of light that are showing on the latch. So let's use some ultramarine blue onto this little puddle right here. I don't want straight white, but I don't want too much of a middle value either. So there's one light here, one light here, and another little zigzag here. And use the fan brush to eliminate the glare. So let's let some of the fur that's underneath of that latch show a little more. So a little bit of pressure here, and then let go. Simple as that. A little bit of pressure here, let go. That's all it is. And there's even a little red emblem there, so I'm going to sketch that in. But of course, I'm not going to write the words that are on that emblem, so just a little bit of a red blob there. That should do. I'm just abbreviating the latch. I'm not trying to perfectly paint the image of that latch. And the same thing for the entire collar as well. Just trying to abbreviate it. It's a little bit of a dark here. And the trick is to make these bold brush strokes and then standing far away and seeing if they hold. I'm trying to minimize the amount of information that I show. And again, I'm going to switch to painting some of the dark over here. You're just making these swooping brush strokes. Letting the vignette go a little bit further down. Let's add some little squiggles here. Why not? Now using the fan brush, I'm going to blur this a little bit more. Just a little bit. Then I'm going to go back to the darks that are over here. A little bit of ultramarine blue, some alizarin crimson, and some of the raw umber. Just going to push that out there. So the last thing I'll do is actually just soften this transition here with my very thin, let's see if you can read it. It's like almost like a watercolor brush. So in any case, I'm just going to soften these little edges right here. Very minimal. And that concludes this fun little painting video. I know the tone was a little bit different with this painting video, but I did want to do something a little bit different, and I apologize for not being able to get to all of the comments right away with my previous videos, but I do know that someone suggested that I paint a portrait of a pet or a dog or a cat or anything like that. So this was actually a lot of fun filming this painting demonstration. So hopefully in the future I'll be doing more pet portraits alongside my weekly portrait painting demonstration. So thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it helps you out, and I will see you on the next video.